You're listening to the FM Podcast.
Welcome, everybody, to the FM Podcast, episode number 2, with me, your host, Brian Neff. You know, in light of this shit show that has been 2020, as well as the upcoming presidential election, I felt like our first official podcast topic should be an effort to bring everyone together. We're at a new level of divided in this country. We have ongoing riots and violence. We have the legacy media, which is the most divisive and corrupt institution in this country. Quick pro tip, if your only news sources are CNN, MSNBC, and Fox News, you're fucking wrong and you need to fix yourself. But I digress. All that being said, today we're going to talk about how we all, regardless of political affiliation, where you stand on the political spectrum, we all need one another to function. And specifically, we will be discussing it from the perspective of Japanese philosopher Nakai Toju. This philosophy of his that we will be discussing can be found in the book Training the Samurai Mind, a Bushido sourcebook. So Toju speaks of the ideas of the culture and the warriorhood. The culture is what we in America would probably refer to as the liberals or the left. The culture is focused on poetry, education, art, refinement. On the other hand, you have the warriorhood. It's what we in America would probably refer to as the right or the conservatives. The warriorhood is focused on preparedness, self-reliance, defense of others, hard work. America, especially in the last few months, has been very much polarized and divided into these groups, the left versus the right, the liberals versus the conservatives. And I can picture it now. The people on the left are just sitting there saying to themselves, this country would be so much better if the conservatives just disappeared. And at the same exact time, the conservatives and the right are just sitting there thinking the exact same thing about the left. Well, Toju looked at the culture and the warriorhood as two wheels of a chariot. Not in the sense as we Americans say left wing or right wing, it's still the same bird trying to fuck you. Instead, Toju looked at the two wheels as inseparable and interdependent for the overall function of the chariot. A chariot with one wheel, either left or right, is useless. It takes the driver nowhere. Both wheels are necessary to get the driver where he needs to go. So how are the culture and the warriorhood so dependently intertwined? In order to explain that, let's just do a little thought experiment and hypothetically assume one exists without the other. What does a state or a country without a warriorhood look like? Well, the culture is free to explore and expand in any direction it wants, with unlimited creativity, with no pushback or foot dragging from the more conservative warriorhood. Artistic and hedonistic freedom would be at an all-time high. However, there will inevitably come a time when the country or the state next door would like to expand and take the things that you hold precious. The warriorhood of that nation will be knocking at your gates, and you won't have the warriorhood of your own to protect you. Inevitably, the foreign invaders will breach the walls. No matter how artistic or innovative this culture might be, it will be set ablaze. The culture will cease to exist, and you will be forced to assimilate into the culture of your conquerors, if you're lucky. However, on the flip side, what does a nation without a culture look like? For starters, It technically doesn't exist since culture is an essential feature of any nation. You need sovereignty and borders and territory. Culture is kind of arguably the fifth requirement for a state to be a state. So, for starters, technically you wouldn't even have anything. But, proceeding. Second, without a culture, the warriorhood has no purpose. The warriorhood exists to protect the culture. Without the culture, the warriorhood has no motivation, no direction. The warriorhood, who thrives off their noble call to duty, they become pointless and useless. As with the two wheels of the chariot, both the culture and the warriorhood are essential to the overall function and success of the chariot. Just like with the culture and the warriorhood, the liberals and the conservatives in this country depend on one another and cannot exist independently. Conservatives, they're the sheepdogs, they're the police officers, the firefighters, the people who are going to step up when the bully gets out of line. Meanwhile, the more liberally minded people are going to be the ones who are saying, maybe black people shouldn't be slaves, or maybe women should be allowed to vote. Both make this country the greatest country to have ever existed in the history of this world. But both contribute, each in their own unique ways. Now, more than ever, it's important to recognize the value of one another and be willing to listen and be willing to compromise to come up with genuine solutions to the problems we face together as Americans. Try to keep that in mind this election season as we go into 2021 and leave this awful, horrendous, hot pile of garbage that has been 2020. So, with that, stay safe out there. Go do something hard today. Watch out for the crazies, and we'll catch you in the next one.
You're listening to the FM Podcast.